There's a moment you know well, even if you've never named it, when movement feels available until you imagine where it might lead. And suddenly, something tightens. You were open a second ago. Then the mind reaches forward, touches the outcome, and the body quietly stops cooperating. This is what we're calling the quantum break. Not fear in the dramatic sense, but a subtle internal locking that happens the instant action becomes entangled with results. Before the thought of, what if this fails? There is fluidity. After that thought, the system collapses into caution, calculation, and delay. You can feel it in the body. Breath shortens, options narrow. It's similar to the way two entangled particles behave before they're observed existing and possibility responsive uncollapsed. But the moment one is measured, the shared system snaps into a fixed configuration. In lived experience, the outcome becomes the measurement event. When you observe the future too early, your action loses its range. This shows up everywhere. A career pivot that feels alive until the paycheck question appears. A creative idea that flows freely until you imagine how it might be received. A conversation you almost start until you picture the response. The break isn't telling you that the action is wrong. It's revealing that the action has become bound to a predicted result. And once action is tethered to outcome, it no longer moves as itself. It moves as a negotiation with fear. What's important here is noticing that paralysis isn't caused by the action. It's caused by the collapse of possibility. You didn't lose courage. You lost openness. This is why willpower doesn't help much. Pushing harder only tightens the entanglement. The pause you experience isn't failure, it's information. It's the system signaling that something is being observed, too soon, measured too tightly, and asked to perform under conditions it was never meant to survive. And that recognition is the first release point. After that first recognition, something subtle lingers. Not relief yet, but awareness. You may notice that the freeze wasn't random. It followed a very specific internal move. The moment the future became a question that needed answering now. In physics, language measurement collapses a system. In lived experience, anticipation does the same thing. The instant you demand certainty from the future, the present tightens to comply. Action stops being exploratory and becomes defensive. This is where fear quietly disguises itself as responsibility. Planning, being realistic, waiting for the right time. But underneath those words is a single pressure point, the need to know how this ends before you begin. When outcome becomes the observer, action loses its freedom to remain adaptive. It has to perform for a verdict that hasn't arrived yet. You can feel the cost of this in the nervous system. There's vigilance instead of curiosity, contraction instead of responsiveness. The system isn't broken, it's responding exactly as designed. When the future is treated as a judge, the body prepares for threat, and preparation looks like hesitation. This is why fear doesn't always feel like fear. Often it feels like thinking, running scenarios, simulating consequences, trying to pre-solve a reality that hasn't stabilized yet. In quantum terms, it's like insisting on a definite state before the system has interacted enough to reveal one naturally. You force collapse early, then blame the result for being narrow. The irony is that the more you try to secure the outcome, the less intelligence the action carries. Because intelligence lives in responsiveness, not prediction. When action is allowed to remain unmeasured, it can listen. It can adjust. It can learn in motion. But once outcome fixation enters, listening stops. Action becomes rigid. This is where people confuse caution with wisdom. Wisdom senses timing. Caution tries to control it. Notice how the break engages most strongly when something matters. Meaningful work, honest expression, real change. The stakes feel high because identity is involved. Who you are being is suddenly on trial. And so the system seeks safety by shrinking possibility. It trades range for certainty. Yet certainty here is an illusion, because the future you're measuring hasn't formed. You're not observing reality. You're observing imagination. And imagination, when treated as fact, becomes a powerful constrictor. This doesn't mean outcomes don't matter. It means they don't belong at the beginning. Measurement has a place, just not at the threshold. When you bring observation too early, you collapse potential before it has time to organize. You limit what could have emerged through interaction. So the break isn't asking you to leap blindly. It's pointing to a misordered sequence. First coherence, then movement, then information. When that order is reversed, fear takes the wheel, and action quietly steps aside. Recognizing this isn't about forcing courage. It's about restoring the natural timing of awareness. And once timing is restored, something else becomes possible. What follows that realization is a quiet shift in orientation, not outward anymore, but inward. Because once you see that fear enters through premature measurement, a deeper question surfaces on its own. If the future isn't the stabilizing force, then what is? The answer isn't control, it's state. Before any action interacts with the world, it emerges from a condition, a tone in the nervous system, a signal carried by the body. This is where frequency becomes a useful metaphor, not as mysticism, but as orientation. Every system broadcasts its condition long before it produces a result. You don't experience life directly as outcomes. You experience it as resonance. Two people can take the same action and land in entirely different realities, not because the action differed, but because the state beneath it did. One moved from tension, the other from coherence. In quantum terms, one variable dominates the system, not the distant result, but the immediate configuration. Your internal state is the dominant particle. Everything else responds to it. This is why forcing outcomes never works cleanly. You're trying to manipulate the environment while ignoring the signal you're emitting into it. The field doesn't respond to effort, it responds to coherence. When the body is regulated, open and responsive action carries intelligence without strain. It adapts, it senses timing, it meets information as it arises. But when the system is contracted by fear of results, even brilliant strategies become blunt. They lack sensitivity. This isn't about positive thinking, it's about regulation. Notice how your best decisions rarely come from urgency. They arise when you feel settled enough to perceive nuance. That settling is frequency in practice, a state where attention isn't hijacked by imagined futures. The paradox is that focusing on results actually destabilizes the system meant to reach them. It pulls awareness out of the present configuration where influence actually exists. You can't tune a radio by arguing with the song you want. You adjust the dial. Likewise, reality doesn't reorganize around desire alone. It reorganizes around the state that desire is expressed from. When fear dominates the internal signal, the system constricts possibilities. When coherence leads options, multiply. This is why some people appear lucky. They're not chasing outcomes. They're maintaining a state that keeps them responsive to what's available. And responsiveness is power. The future isn't something you push toward. It's something you enter through alignment. Once you see that the question changes, not how do I make this work, but what state am I moving from right now? That question doesn't demand an answer. It invites noticing. And noticing begins to loosen the brake, not by force, but by recentering authority where it belongs, inside the signal. From that internal recentering, a different kind of clarity starts to form, less mental, more sensory. You begin to notice that effort and alignment feel nothing alike. They may look similar from the outside, but inside the difference is unmistakable. This is where the radio metaphor earns its place. Not as an explanation, but as a felt orientation. A radio doesn't argue with the song it wants to hear. It doesn't grip the antenna harder or demand a specific melody. It tunes. When the dial aligns with the station, the music arrives on its own, clear and coherent. When it doesn't, no amount of forcing improves the signal. Trying to control outcomes is like shaking the radio and hoping the right song plays. The motion is real. The intelligence is missing. Internal frequency works the same way. Your system is always broadcasting, whether you're aware of it or not. When fear dominates, the signal is noisy. Actions fragment. Feedback arrives distorted. But when the body is regulated and attention is present, the signal sharpens. You don't need to predict what comes next. You can respond to what's here. This is where many people get confused. They think tuning means passivity. It doesn't. Tuning is active attentiveness without strain. It's the difference between gripping the wheel and feeling the road. When you're aligned, decisions don't feel heroic. They feel obvious, not easy, clear. The trap is believing that clarity must come from certainty about outcomes. In reality, clarity comes from coherence in the system making the choice. You can feel this in the body, a subtle openness in the chest, breath moving without effort. That's not confidence about the future, it's safety in the present. And safety is what allows action to remain fluid. Without it, everything hardens. This is why forcing yourself to just do it often backfires. You move, but you're moving against your own signal. Alignment doesn't eliminate risk. It eliminates internal resistance. The future still contains uncertainty, but uncertainty stops feeling like a threat when your system trusts its ability to respond. That trust isn't built by success, it's built by regulation. Every time you act from a settled state, regardless of outcome, the nervous system learns something important. That movement doesn't equal danger. Over time, this retrains the brake. Not by convincing it, but by showing it consistency. You don't need to know the song before you tune. You tune so you can hear it. And once you understand that action stops being about forcing reality, it becomes about staying in resonance long enough for reality to answer back. That's when movement regains its natural intelligence. At this point, something important shifts in how possibility is felt, not imagined, but sensed. When alignment replaces forcing, the future stops feeling like a wall you're running toward and starts feeling like a structure you're already inside. That's where the idea of an energetic blueprint becomes useful. Not as belief, as orientation. A blueprint isn't a promise, it's a relational map that exists before construction ever begins. In the same way, the outcomes you're drawn toward don't begin as achievements. They begin as patterns of coherence already present in the field. This is where the metaphor of entanglement softens into something more intimate. Two particles don't negotiate their connection after observation. The relationship exists first. Likewise, what you want isn't waiting at the end of effort. It's already part of the shared system you're interacting with. The mistake is assuming desire means lack. That wanting implies absence. Often desire is recognition, a signal detected before it's fully visible. The energetic blueprint isn't a fantasy of guaranteed results. It's a subtle knowing that certain configurations are already available because you can feel them, not clearly, but consistently. You've likely noticed this before. Some ideas don't leave you alone. Some directions keep resurfacing even when logic argues against them. That persistence isn't obsession, it's resonance. In quantum language, entangled states share information regardless of distance. In lived experience, resonance shows up as familiarity without proof. You don't know how it will happen, you don't know when, but something in you recognizes the shape of it. That recognition doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the body's relationship with possibility. This is why chasing outcomes feels heavy. You're treating something relational as something external. The blueprint isn't ahead of you, it's around you. When action aligns with it, effort decreases even if complexity increases. There's less friction, not because it's easy, but because the system isn't fighting itself. This is where knowing replaces hoping, not certainty. Knowing doesn't require evidence, it requires coherence. You feel it when choices narrow naturally instead of through elimination, when options fall away without force. That's the shared connection becoming more apparent. Many people try to visualize outcomes here, thinking clarity means imagery. But the blueprint isn't visual, it's relational, a felt sense of rightness that doesn't shout. Trying to picture it often pulls you back into measurement, into collapse. Instead, the invitation is to notice what already feels integrated, what doesn't require persuasion. Notice how certain actions feel like returning rather than advancing, as if you're stepping into a room you've been in before. That familiarity isn't memory, it's alignment. The more you act from this recognition, the more the system stabilizes around it. Not because you're manifesting something new, but because you're cooperating with what's already present. This changes how risk is experienced. Risk stops being about losing the future and starts being about staying honest with the present. And honesty has a stabilizing effect. You don't need to believe in the blueprint, you only need to stop arguing with the signals that point toward it. When you do, action becomes less about proving something will work and more about staying in relationship with what's already calling. That's when movement regains a quiet confidence, not loud, grounded, and from there, something else becomes possible. Once that sense of blueprint settles in the way you relate to knowing begins to change, not dramatically, almost privately, because knowing here doesn't arrive as a thought you can defend. It arrives as a steadiness that doesn't need backup. This is where many people hesitate because they've been trained to trust only what can be seen, predicted, or justified. But the knowing we're pointing to doesn't argue its case. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It simply remains. In quantum terms, information can exist in a shared system before any direct measurement occurs. In lived experience, this feels like orientation without explanation. You're not certain about outcomes. You're certain about direction. That distinction matters. Outcome certainty asks for closure. Directional knowing allows movement. You've likely felt this before in small ways. Choosing a path without being able to explain why. Ending something that still made sense on paper. Starting something that didn't. The body often knows before the mind feels safe admitting it. This isn't intuition as mystique, it's pattern recognition below language. Your system has been interacting with the field long before conscious thought weighs in. It picks up coherence, it notices alignment. When you act from this knowing, there's less internal debate, not because doubt disappears, but because doubt loses authority. You stop asking, will this work, and begin noticing, does this stay true as I move? That subtle shift keeps action alive. Knowing doesn't freeze the system, certainty does. This is why trying to lock in confidence often backfires. You're attempting to stabilize something that needs to stay responsive. True knowing is flexible. It adjusts without abandoning itself. You can feel it as a quiet forward pull that doesn't rush, a readiness without urgency. And importantly, this knowing doesn't demand immediate action. It allows timing to reveal itself. The nervous system stays regulated because it isn't being asked to leap for proof. It's being invited to remain in contact. Remaining in contact is key. When people override this knowing, they usually do so in favor of explanation. They trade felt coherence for intellectual safety, but explanation is always late. It arrives after movement, not before. When you let knowing lead, explanations catch up organically, through feedback, through interaction. This is how action stays intelligent. You're no longer acting to confirm a future. You're acting to stay aligned with a signal. That signal refines itself as you move. It doesn't require you to be right. It requires you to be present. Presence keeps the system open, and openness prevents collapse. This is the difference between forcing confidence and inhabiting it. One is loud, the other is quiet enough to hear what comes next. As this settles, action begins to feel less like a test and more like a conversation, a back and forth with reality that doesn't rush to conclusions. And that conversational quality is what allows something even more liberating to emerge. At that stage, a different relationship to action starts to take shape. Not hesitant, not forceful, unattached. This is where the idea of superposition becomes lived rather than theoretical. Before collapse, a system can hold multiple potentials without strain. In action, non-attachment functions the same way. You move without demanding a single fixed outcome. That freedom preserves creativity. When you're attached to results, every step feels like it must justify itself. Mistakes become threats. Feedback feels personal. But when attachment loosens, action regains play. It experiments. It adapts. You're no longer trying to win a specific future. You're staying in conversation with the present. This is where many misunderstand and assume non-attachment means indifference. It doesn't. Care remains. Effort remains. What dissolves is the grip. When outcomes stop defining your identity, the system relaxes enough to notice alternatives. Paths you couldn't see before emerge because you're no longer staring at a single target. In physics, terms collapse happens when observation becomes rigid. In life, collapse happens when meaning gets pinned to one result. Non-attachment keeps meaning distributed. It allows multiple interpretations to coexist long enough for the most aligned one to surface. This is why flow feels effortless, even when it's demanding. The effort isn't burdened by self-protection. The nervous system stays regulated because it isn't defending a story about how things must go. This is also why people in flow often appear confident, not because they know the ending, but because they trust the process of adjustment. Superposition in action looks like this. You commit fully to the step you're taking while remaining open to how it reshapes itself. Commitment without rigidity, direction without demand. The moment you demand a specific collapse, creativity narrows. You stop listening. But when you allow the system to reveal itself through interaction, intelligence increases with each move. This doesn't mean drifting, it means moving with sensitivity. The difference between doing nothing and acting from knowing lies here. Doing nothing avoids engagement. Unattached action engages without control. One is frozen, the other is fluid. You can feel the difference in the body. Avoidance feels heavy. Unattached action feels light even when it's challenging. This lightness isn't excitement, it's lack of internal resistance. When resistance drops, energy becomes available. Ideas connect. Opportunities register. The field responds to coherence, not insistence. As attachment dissolves, you may notice a strange thing. Outcomes still happen, often better than expected. Not because you made them happen, but because you didn't block the system's ability to organize. Non-attachment isn't the absence of intention, it's the absence of interference. And once you experience that difference, it becomes difficult to unsee, because you realize that the break was never protecting you from failure. It was protecting an identity attached to control. Letting go of that identity creates space for something steadier to take the lead. And that shift carries you toward a new kind of movement altogether. By now, a subtle tension often appears. Not confusion, but a question hovering in the background. If attachment loosens, what keeps you moving at all? Because from the outside, non-attachment can look suspiciously like hesitation, like waiting, like doing less. But internally, the difference is unmistakable. Passive inaction carries weight. There's drag in it, a sense of holding back while telling yourself you're being patient. Embodied movement feels different. Even when nothing visible is happening, something is alive. This is the distinction that matters. In physics, a particle at rest isn't the same as a particle in superposition. One is inert, the other is full of unresolved potential. In lived experience, avoidance and openness can look identical yet feel worlds apart. Avoidance narrows awareness, it loops the same thoughts. Time feels heavy. Embodied movement, even when subtle, expands perception. You notice more. Connections form quietly. This is why waiting for clarity often fails. Because clarity doesn't come from stillness alone. It comes from contact. Action without attachment maintains contact without demanding resolution. It allows information to arrive through interaction. Doing nothing avoids interaction altogether. You can sense which one you're in by how the body feels. Avoidance brings tension without direction. Embodied movement brings direction without pressure. That distinction is subtle, but once felt, it's unmistakable. This is where many people accidentally re-engage the break. They confuse letting go of outcomes with stepping away from movement. But the system doesn't want disengagement. It wants responsiveness. Responsiveness doesn't rush, it doesn't freeze, it stays available. In that availability, timing becomes visible. Not as a date on a calendar, but as readiness in the body. You notice when something feels ripe, when a conversation wants to happen, when a step feels aligned. Not because you planned it perfectly, because you stayed in contact long enough to feel it. This is what flow actually requires. Not constant motion, but continuous openness. When openness closes, momentum dies. When openness remains, even small actions carry disproportionate impact. This is why some people seem to do less yet move faster. They aren't expending energy on resistance. Their system isn't fighting itself. Embodied movement doesn't need to justify its pace. It trusts timing because it can feel it. That trust isn't blind, it's relational. You're relating to your own state, to the field, to feedback as it appears. In this relationship, fear loses leverage, not because it's defeated, but because it's no longer in charge of timing. The brake loosens further here, because the system learns something essential. Movement doesn't require force, it requires presence. And presence, once established, begins to reorganize identity itself. That's where the next shift begins. At some point, the change stops feeling like something you're doing. It starts feeling like something you're becoming, not suddenly, gradually. Because when frequency leads, when attachment loosens, when action stays responsive, identity begins to reorganize around a new center. You're no longer the one trying to make things happen. You're the one things move through. This is what activating the inner quantum pilot actually means. Not control, but stabilization. Every system needs a stabilizing signal, something consistent enough that movement can orient around it. When identity is tied to outcomes, the signal is unstable. It spikes with hope, crashes with fear, oscillates with external feedback. But when identity shifts toward coherence, the signal steadies. You become the constant the system can trust. This doesn't remove emotion, it contextualizes it. Fear can arise without steering. Excitement can arise without hijacking. You're no longer inside every reaction. You're hosting them. In quantum terms, the observer influences the system not by force, but by position. In lived experience, who you are being matters more than what you're trying to get. This is where responsibility changes meaning. It stops being about managing outcomes and starts being about tending state, not controlling feelings, regulating capacity. When you take care of coherence, actions self-organize more intelligently than when you micromanage direction. This is why the pilot metaphor fits. A skilled pilot doesn't fight the sky. They read conditions, adjust subtly, and maintain orientation. The destination still exists, but it's reached through relationship, not domination. As this identity stabilizes, fear loses its favorite leverage point. It can no longer claim that everything depends on this one result, because identity no longer depends on results. That doesn't make you careless. It makes you resilient. You can engage fully without betting your worth on the outcome. You can adapt without interpreting change as failure. This identity pressure is gentle but profound. If you are the stabilizing signal, then waiting for permission no longer makes sense. Not because you must act, but because action is a natural expression of coherence. You move when movement arises. You pause when pause is indicated. Neither is dramatic, both are appropriate. This is how decisiveness emerges without force, not from certainty about the future, but from clarity about who you are being now. When identity aligns this way, the brake has very little left to grab onto. There's no single outcome to protect, no image to defend, just presence, orientation, and response. And from that place, life begins to feel less like a series of tests and more like an unfolding interaction, which leads to the final integration. What emerges next isn't a conclusion, it's a way of living. Because once identity stabilizes as signal rather than seeker, daily life reorganizes quietly around that fact. Decisions feel different now, not lighter in importance, but lighter in weight. You still care, you still choose, but the charge around choosing dissolves. Morning actions stop feeling like bets on the future. They feel like expressions of state. You answer the email, make the call, take the step, not because you know where it leads, but because it's the honest movement available from coherence. This is where experimentation replaces fear, not reckless experimentation. Gentle, intelligent testing. You try something. You watch how the system responds. You adjust. There's no drama in feedback anymore. Information arrives without threatening identity. In quantum language, the system is allowed to interact before collapsing into meaning. In lived experience, you let life answer you before you decide what it means. This is a profound shift. Most people try to decide meaning first, then act in alignment with that decision. Here, action precedes interpretation. Meaning emerges through contact. This changes how success and failure are experienced. They stop being verdicts, they become signals. Signals about timing, about alignment, about state. When something doesn't move forward, it doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like information asking for recalibration. And because identity isn't on the line, recalibration doesn't sting, it sharpens. You may notice that momentum becomes smoother, not faster. Things happen with fewer sharp starts and stops. The brake no longer slams. It gently modulates. Fear still appears at thresholds, but thresholds no longer feel like walls. They feel like invitations to tune. This is how the quantum brake truly releases, not by disappearing, but by being recontextualized. It stops governing movement and starts offering data. You don't fight it, you listen. And listening keeps you in relationship with the field, with your body, with unfolding reality. From here, creativity feels safer because you're no longer asking it to justify itself in advance. You create, speak, move, initiate not to secure an outcome, but to stay in coherence with what wants to express through you. This doesn't make life predictable. It makes it navigable. You trust your ability to respond more than your ability to predict, and that trust becomes self-reinforcing. Over time, fear-based loops lose energy, not because you solved them, but because you stopped feeding them attention through premature measurement. The system learns a new default. Action is allowed. Adjustment is expected. Identity is stable. And perhaps the most noticeable change is this. You stop asking whether you're allowed to move. Movement feels like a natural function again. Not heroic, not dramatic, just honest participation. From that place, the future doesn't need to be conquered or secured. It meets you as you arrive. And you arrive not as someone chasing results, but as someone carrying coherence forward step by step. That's what living beyond the brake looks like. quiet, responsive, alive. What remains now isn't a technique to remember, it's a posture, a way of standing inside your own experience that doesn't rush to define itself. You may notice that nothing here asked you to become fearless. Fear was never the problem. The problem was letting fear decide when movement was allowed. As this settles, something softens in how you relate to the future. Not indifference, trust. Not trust that things will go a certain way, but trust that you will remain present enough to respond when they don't. That kind of trust lives in the body. In breath that doesn't brace. In attention that doesn't grip. You don't need to hold on to these ideas. They aren't instructions. They're reminders of something your system already knows how to do when it isn't being hurried. You felt this state before, in moments where action flowed without commentary, where you moved, spoke, created, or chose, without checking who you'd be afterward. Those moments weren't accidents. They were coherence unburdened by measurement. Nothing about this path asks you to abandon planning effort or discernment. It simply asks that those things follow state rather than attempt to replace it. When coherence leads, thinking becomes supportive instead of dominant, useful instead of loud. And if at times the break returns, that isn't regression, it's feedback. An invitation to notice what's being measured too soon, what outcome is being asked to guarantee safety. You don't need to remove that fear. You only need to stop letting it define the sequence. State first, movement next, meaning later. That order restores a quiet dignity to action. From here, life doesn't ask you to be certain. It asks you to be available. Available to tune, available to adjust, available to recognize when alignment is present and when it needs care. You're not stepping into a new identity. You're returning to a more stable one. The version of you that doesn't need permission to move, because movement is no longer a bet against the future. It's a conversation with the present, and that conversation continues not because you force it, but because you're listening. That's enough.